Alexandria is the second largest city and a major economic center in Egypt, extending about 32 kilometers along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea in the north-central part of the country. Its low elevation on the Nile Delta makes it highly vulnerable to rising sea levels. Alexandria is Egypt's largest seaport, serving approximately 80% of Egypt's imports and exports. It is an important industrial center because of its natural gas and oil pipelines from Suez. Alexandria is also an important tourist destination. Alexandria was founded around the small ancient Egyptian town c. 331 BC by Alexander the Great. It became an important center of the Hellenistic civilization and remained the capital of Hellenistic and Roman and Byzantine Egypt for almost 1,000 years until the Muslim conquest of Egypt in AD 641, when a new capital was founded at Fustat. Hellenistic Alexandria was best known for the Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, its great library, and the necropolis, one of the seven wonders of the Middle Ages. Alexandria was the second most powerful city of the ancient world after Rome. Ongoing maritime archaeology in the harbor of Alexandria, which began in 1994, is revealing details of Alexandria both before the arrival of Alexander, when a city named Raketis existed there, and during the Ptolemaic dynasty. For the late 18th century, Alexandria became a major center of the international shipping industry and one of the most important trading centers in the world, both because it profited from the easy overland connection between the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, and the lucrative trade in Egyptian cotton. History. Ancient era Alexandria was founded by Alexander the Great in April 331 BC as Lambda Epsilon Chi Alpha Nu Delta Rho Epsilon Iota Alpha. Alexander's chief architect for the project was Dinocrates. Alexandria was intended to supersede Nocratis as a Hellenistic center in Egypt, and to be the link between Greece and the rich Nile Valley. Alexandria was the intellectual and cultural center of the ancient world for some time. The city and its museum attracted many of the greatest scholars, including Greeks, Jews and Syrians. The city was later plundered and lost its significance. Just east of Alexandria, there was in ancient times marshland and several islands. As early as the 7th century BC, there existed important port cities of Canopus and Heracleion. The latter was recently rediscovered underwater. An Egyptian city, Rakotis, already existed on the shore also, and later gave its name to Alexandria in the Egyptian language. It continued to exist as the Egyptian quarter of the city. A few months after the foundation, Alexander left Egypt and never returned to his city. After Alexander's departure, his viceroy, Cleomenes, continued the expansion. Following a struggle with the other successors of Alexander, his general Ptolemy succeeded in bringing Alexander's body to Alexandria, though it was eventually lost after being separated from its burial site there. Although Cleomenes was mainly in charge of overseeing Alexandria's continuous development, the Heptastadion and the mainland quarters seem to have been primarily Ptolemaic work, inheriting the trade of ruined Tyre and becoming the center of the new commerce between Europe and the Arabian and Indian East. The city grew in less than a generation to be larger than Carthage. In a century, Alexandria had become the largest city in the world, and for some centuries more it was second only to Rome. It became Egypt's main Greek city, with Greek people from diverse backgrounds. Alexandria was not only a center of Hellenism, but was also home to the largest urban Jewish community in the world. The Septuagint, a Greek version of the Tanakh, was produced there. The early Ptolemies kept it in order and fostered the development of its museum into the leading Hellenistic center of learning, but were careful to maintain the distinction of its population's three largest ethnicities, Greek, Jewish, and Egyptian. In AD 115, large parts of Alexandria were destroyed during the Kitos War, which gave Hadrian and his architect, Decrianus, an opportunity to rebuild it. In 215, the Emperor Caracalla visited the city and, because of some insulting satires that the inhabitants had directed at him, abruptly commanded his troops to put to death all youths capable of bearing arms. On the 21st of July 365, Alexandria was devastated by a tsunami, an event annually commemorated years later as a Day of Horror. During Muhammad's era, the Islamic prophet Muhammad's first interaction with the people of Egypt was during the expedition of Zayd ibn Haritha. He sent Hattab bin Abi Baltair with a letter to the king of Egypt and Alexandria called Makakis. In the letter Muhammad said, "I invite you to accept Islam. Allah the Sublime shall reward you doubly. But if you refuse to do so, you'll bear the burden of the transgression of all the Copts." During this expedition, one of Muhammad's envoys, Dihya bin Khalifa Kalbi, was attacked. Muhammad sent Zayd ibn Haritha to help him. Dihya approached the Banu Dubaybi for help. When the news reached Muhammad, he immediately dispatched Zayd ibn Haritha with 500 men to battle. The Muslim army fought with Banu Judam, killed several of them, including the chief, Al-Hunayd ibn Arad and his son, and captured 1,000 camels, 5,000 of the cattle and 100 women and boys. The new chief of the Banu Judam, who had embraced Islam, appealed to Muhammad to release his fellow tribesmen, and Muhammad released them. Islamic era. In 619, Alexandria fell to the Sassanid Persians, although the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius recovered it in 629. In 641, the Arabs under the general Amr ibn al-As captured it during the Muslim conquest of Egypt, after a siege that lasted 14 months. After the Battle of Ridania in 1517, the city was conquered by the Ottoman Turks and remained under Ottoman rule until 1798. Alexandria lost much of its former importance to the Egyptian port city of Rosetta during the 9th to 18th centuries, and only regained its former prominence with the construction of the Mahmoudiya Canal in 1807. Alexandria figured prominently in the military operations of Napoleon's expedition to Egypt in 1798. French troops stormed the city on the 2nd of July 1798, and it remained in the hands until the arrival of a British expedition in 1801. The British won a considerable victory over the French at the Battle of Alexandria on the 21st of March 1801, following which they besieged the city, which fell to them on the 2nd of September 1801. Muhammad Ali, the Ottoman governor of Egypt, began rebuilding and redevelopment around 1810, and by 1850, Alexandria had returned to something akin to its former glory. Egypt turned to Europe in their effort to modernize the country. Greeks, followed by other Europeans and others, began moving to the city. In the early 20th century, the city became a home for novelists and poets. In July 1882, the city came under bombardment from British naval forces and was occupied. In July 1954, the city was a target of an Israeli bombing campaign that later became known as the Lavon Affair. On the 26th of October 1954, Alexandria's Manshare Square was the site of a failed assassination attempt on Gamal Abdel Nasser. Europeans began leaving Alexandria following the 1956 Suez crisis that led to an outburst of Arab nationalism. The nationalization of property by Nasser, which reached its highest point in 1961, drove out nearly all the rest. Timeline. The most important battles and sieges of Alexandria include Siege of Alexandria, Julius Caesar's Civil War, Battle of Alexandria, Final War of the Roman Republic, Siege of Alexandria, Byzantine-Persian Wars, Siege of Alexandria, Rashidun conquest of Byzantine Egypt, Alexandrian Crusade, a crusade led by Peter de Lusignan of Cyprus which resulted in the defeat of the Mamluks and the sack of the city, Battle of Alexandria, French Revolutionary Wars, Siege of Alexandria, French Revolutionary Wars, Alexandria Expedition, French Revolutionary Wars. Geography. Alexandria is located in the country of Egypt, on the southern coast of the Mediterranean. Climate. Alexandria has a borderline hot desert climate, approaching a hot semi-arid climate. As the rest of Egypt's northern coast, the prevailing north wind, blowing across the Mediterranean, gives the city a less severe climate from the desert hinterland. Rafah and Alexandria are the wettest places in Egypt. The other wettest places are Rosetta, Baltam, Kafr el-Dawar and Misor Matruh. The city's climate is influenced by the Mediterranean Sea, moderating its temperatures, causing variable rainy winters and moderately hot summers that, at times, can be very humid. January and February are the coolest months, with daily maximum temperatures typically ranging from 12 to 18 degrees Celsius and minimum temperatures that could reach 5 degrees Celsius. Alexandria experiences violent storms, rain and sometimes sleet and hail during the cooler months. These events, combined with a poor drainage system, have been responsible for occasional flooding in the city. July and August are the hottest and driest months of the year, with an average daily maximum temperature of 30 degrees Celsius. The average annual rainfall is around 200 mm but has been as high as 417 mm. Port Said, Qusayr, Baltam, Damietta and Alexandria have the least temperature variation in Egypt. The highest recorded temperature was 45 degrees Celsius on May 30, 1961, and the coldest recorded temperature was 0 degrees Celsius on January 31, 1994. Layout of the ancient city. Greek Alexandria was divided into 3 regions. Brutium, the royal or Greek quarter, forming the most magnificent portion of the city. In Roman times, Brutium was enlarged by the addition of an official quarter, making 4 regions in all. The city was laid out as a grid of parallel streets, each of which had an attendant subterranean canal. The Jewish quarter, forming the northeast portion of the city. Rakotis, the old city of Rakotis that had been absorbed into Alexandria, was occupied chiefly by Egyptians. 2 main streets lined with colonnades and said to have been each about 60 meters wide, intersected in the center of the city, close to the point where the Summer of Alexander rose. This point is very near the present Mosque of Nebi Daniel and the line of the Great East-West Canopic Street, only slightly diverged from that of the modern Boulevard de Rosette. Traces of its pavement and canal have been found near the Rosetta Gate, but remnants of streets and canals were exposed in 1899 by German excavators outside the east fortifications, which lie well within the area of the ancient city. Alexandria consisted originally of little more than the island of Pharos, which was joined to the mainland by a mole nearly a mile long and called the Heptastadion. The end of this abutted on the land at the head of the present Grand Square, where the Moon Gate rose. All that now lies between the point and the modern Ras Al Tin quarter is built on the silt which gradually widened and obliterated this mole. The Ras Al Tin quarter represents all that is left of the island of Pharos, the site of the actual lighthouse having been weathered away by the sea. On the east of the mole was the great harbor, now an open bay on On the west lay the port of Eunostos, with its inner basin Kibotos, now vastly enlarged to form the modern harbour. In Strabo's time, the principal buildings were as follows, enumerated as they were to be seen from a ship entering the great harbour. The royal palaces, filling the northeast angle of the town and occupying the promontory of Lochias, which shut in the great harbour on the east. Lochias has almost entirely disappeared into the sea, together with the palaces, the private port, and the island of Antrodos. There has been a land subsidence here, as throughout the northeast coast of Africa. The great theatre on the modern hospital hill near the Ramla station. This was used by Julius Caesar as a fortress, where he withstood a siege from the city mob after he took Egypt after the Battle of Pharsalus. The Poseidon, or Temple of the Sea God, close to the theatre. The Timonium, built by Mark Antony. The Emporium, the Apostases, the Navalia, lying west of the Timonium along the sea front as far as the Mole. Behind the Emporium rose the great Caesarium, by which stood the two great obelisks, which become known as Cleopatra's Needles, and were transported to New York City and London. This temple became, in time, the Patriarchal Church, though some ancient remains of the temple have been discovered. The actual Caesarium, the parts not eroded by the waves, lies under the houses lining the new sea wall. The gymnasium and a palaestra are both inland, near the Boulevard de Rosette in the eastern half of the town. Sites unknown. The Temple of Saturn, site unknown. The Mausolei of Alexander and the Ptolemies in one ring fence, near the point of intersection of the two main streets. The Museum with its famous library and theatre in the same region, site unknown. The Serapeum, the most famous of all Alexandrian temples. Strabo tells us that this stood in the west of the city, and recent discoveries go far as to place it near Pompey's Pillar, which was an independent monument erected to commemorate Diocletian's siege of the city. The names of a few other public buildings on the mainland are known, but there is little information as to their actual position. None, however, are as famous as the building that stood on the eastern point of Pharos Island. There, the Great Lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the world, reputed to be 138 meters high, was situated. The first Ptolemy began the project, and the second Ptolemy completed it, at a total cost of 800 talents. It took 12 years to complete and served as a prototype for all later lighthouses in the world. The light was produced by a furnace at the top, and the tower was built mostly with solid blocks of limestone. The Pharos lighthouse was destroyed by an earthquake in the 14th century, making it the second longest surviving ancient wonder, after the Great Pyramid of Giza. A temple of Hephaestus also stood on Pharos at the head of the mole. In the 1st century, the population of Alexandria contained over 180,000 adult male citizens, in addition to a large number of freedmen, women, children and slaves. Estimates of the total population range from 216,000 to 500,000 to over 1 million, making it one of the largest cities ever built before the Industrial Revolution, and the largest pre-industrial city that was not an imperial capital. Ancient remains. Due to the constant presence of war in Alexandria in ancient times, very little of the ancient city has survived into the present day. Much of the royal and civic quarters sank beneath the harbour due to earthquake subsidence in AD 365, and the rest has been built over in modern times. Pompey's Pillar, a Roman triumphal column, is one of the best-known ancient monuments still standing in Alexandria today. It is located on Alexandria's ancient Acropolis, a modest hill located adjacent to the city's Arab cemetery, and was originally part of a temple colonnade, including its pedestal. It is 30 meters high. The shaft is of polished red granite, 2.7 meters in diameter at the base, taking tapering to 2.4 meters at the top. The shaft is 88 feet high, and made out of a single piece of granite. Its volume is 132 cubic meters and weight approximately 396 tons. Pompey's pillar may have been erected using the same methods that were used to erect the ancient obelisks. The Romans had cranes, but they were not strong enough to lift something this heavy. Roger Hopkins and Mark Lerner conducted several obelisk erecting experiments, including a successful attempt to erect a 25-ton obelisk in 1999. This followed 2 experiments to erect smaller obelisks and 2 failed attempts to erect a 25-ton obelisk. The structure was plundered and demolished in the 4th century when a bishop decreed that paganism must be eradicated. Pompey's pillar is a misnomer, as it has nothing to do with Pompey, having been erected in 293 for Diocletian, possibly in memory of the rebellion of Domitianus. Beneath the Acropolis itself are the subterranean remains of the Serapeum, where the mysteries of the god Serapis were enacted, and whose carved wall niches are believed to have provided overflow storage space for the ancient library. In more recent years, many ancient artifacts have been discovered from the surrounding sea, mostly pieces of old pottery. Alexandria's catacombs, known as Kom al-Shokafar, are a short distance southwest of the pillar, consist of a multi-level labyrinth, reached via a large spiral staircase, and featuring dozens of chambers adorned with sculpted pillars, statues, and other syncretic Romano-Egyptian religious symbols, burial niches, and sarcophagi, as well as a large Roman-style banquet room, where memorial meals were conducted by relatives of the deceased. The catacombs were long forgotten by the citizens until they were discovered by accident in 1900. The most extensive ancient excavation currently being conducted in Alexandria is known as Kom al-Dika. It has revealed the ancient city's well-preserved theatre, and the remains of its Roman-era baths. Antiquities. Persistent efforts have been made to explore the antiquities of Alexandria. Encouragement and help have been given by the local archaeological society, and by many individuals, notably Greeks proud of a city which is one of the glories of the national history. Excavations were performed in the city by Greeks seeking the tomb of Alexander the Great without success. The past and present directors of the museum have been enabled from time to time to carry out systematic excavations whenever opportunity is offered. D.G. Hogarth made tentative researches on behalf of the Egypt Exploration Fund and the Society for the Promotion of Hellenic Studies in 1895, and a German expedition worked for 2 years. But 2 difficulties faced the would-be excavator in Alexandria: lack of space for excavation and the underwater location of some areas of interest, since the great and growing modern city stands immediately over the ancient one. It is almost impossible to find any considerable space in which to dig, except at enormous cost. Cleopatra VII's royal quarters were inundated by earthquakes and tidal waves, leading to gradual subsidence in the 4th century AD. This underwater section, containing many of the most interesting sections of the Hellenistic city, including the Palace Quarter, was explored in 1992 and is still being extensively investigated by the French underwater archaeologist Franck Godiot and his team. It raised a noted head of Caesarion. These are being opened up to tourists to some controversy. The spaces that are most open are the low grounds to northeast and southwest, where it is practically impossible to get below the Roman strata. The most important results were those achieved by Dr. G. Botti, late director of the museum, in the neighborhood of Pompey's Pillar, where there is a good deal of open ground. Here, substructures of a large building, a group of buildings, have been exposed, which are perhaps part of the Serapeum. Nearby, immense catacombs and columbaria have been opened, which may have been appendages of the temple. These contain one very remarkable vault with curious painted reliefs, now artificially lit and open to visitors. The objects found in these researches are in the museum, the most notable being a great basalt bull, probably once an object of cult in the Serapeum. Other catacombs and tombs have been opened in Qom al-Shokafa and Ras al-Tian. The German excavation team found remains of a Ptolemaic colonnade and streets in the northeast of the city, but little else. Hogarth explored part of an immense brick structure under the mound of Qom al-Dika, which may have been part of the Panium, the Morsili, or a Roman fortress. The making of the new foreshore led to the dredging up of remains of the patriarchal church, and the foundations of modern buildings are seldom laid without some objects of antiquity being discovered. The wealth underground is doubtlessly immense, but despite all efforts, there is not much for antiquarians to see in Alexandria outside the museum and a neighborhood of Pompey's Pillar, Temple of Tarposiris Magna. The temple was built in the Ptolemy era and dedicated to Osiris, which finished the construction of Alexandria. It is located in Abuzair, the western suburb of Alexandria in Borg el Arab city. Only the outer wall and the pylons remain from the temple. There is evidence to prove that sacred animals were worshipped there. Archaeologists found an animal necropolis near the temple. Remains of a Christian church show that the temple was used as a church in later centuries. Also found in the same area are remains of public baths built by the Emperor Justinian, a sea wall, quays and a bridge. Near the beach side of the area, there are the remains of a tower built by Ptolemy II Philadelphus. The tower was an exact-scale replica of the destroyed Alexandrine Pharos lighthouse. Modern city districts. Modern Alexandria is divided into 6 districts. Al-Montaza district, population 1,190,287. Shark district, population 985,786. Wasat district, population 520,450. Al-Amriya district, population 845,845. Agami district, population 386,374. Al-Gomrok district, population 145,558. There are also 2 cities under the jurisdiction of the Alexandria Governorate forming Metropolitan Alexandria. Borg al Arab City, population 113,209. New Borg al Arab City, population 150,000. Neighborhoods of Bukia, Mamora, Montaza, Mandara, Asafre, Miami, Sidi Bish, Sarai, Victoria, Sanyouf, Laurent, Tharwat, San Stefano, Gianniclis, Schutz, Cizinia, Glim, Bacchus, Saba Pasha, Fleming, Dafir, Berkeley, Stanley, Rushdie, Mustafa Kamal, Kafrabdu, Smoa, Nora, Sidi Gaba, Cleopatra, Sporting, Ibrahimia, Camp Caesar, Al-Shatbi, Hadara, Azuta, Muharrambek, LRAML Downtown, Qum al-Dika, Eastern Harbour, Anfushi, Manshia Atarine, Karmas, Ras el-Tin, El-Laban, Mina el-Basal, Western Harbour, Kabari, Wardian el-Max, Dekila, Agami, Al-Hanufil, Amrea, King Marriott, Berg al-Arab Squares, Orabi Square, in downtown. Sardzalul Square, in downtown. Tahir Square, in downtown. Ahmed Zawal Square, near Waybor Al-Maya. El Suef Square, in El Suef Gamal Abu Herad Street. Palaces. Montaza Palace, in Montaza. Ras Al-Tian Palace, in Ras Al-Tian. Presidential Palace, in Mamora. Palais d'Antonia this, in Smoha. Citadels situated in East Alexandria. Qaitbay Citadel is one of the few remaining citadels in city from 15th century. Recreational Montaza Royal Gardens, Antoniades Park, Shalalat Gardens, Alexandria Zoo, Green Plaza, Fantasyland, Marmora Beach, Alexandria, Marina Resort.